News this week about a change to short-term rental regulations. As I understand it, the short-term rental license is now tied to the property, not the person. And what agents want to know is if a buyer buys somewhere that already has a license, if somebody buys a property that already has a license, then do I still need express consent for the name change if the license is tied to the property and not the person? That's the $1 million question.
Okay. Well, what we're asking here is the rental license easily transferable without any issues to a new buyer? That's it's an important question. And at the moment, the very easy answer to that question is that no, it's not that easy. There are still instructions from the regional tourism registry that require certain documents when you want to register as a new owner. And one of them is, besides the nota simple and other things, it's also the positive approval from the community of owners. Maybe we have to backtrack to see where we end up on this whole thing, but it's not that easy, no.
So let's just, like you said, let's go back a step. So what is the change? I mean, where did it happen?
Yeah. So it is good. Well, I would say it's good news. It's important news. It's something very relevant for our market, and the decision came from the Ministry of Justice, and I think it's important to highlight that it's not a Supreme Court of Spain. It's not even a court, but it is a legal body, and it has an authority, and it definitely has an authority over the Andalusian Tourism Registry. They shall follow these kind of decisions, right? And what did they say? So they concluded, as you mentioned, that the rental license is real, as they stated in Spanish. It's a real license, meaning that it's tied to the asset and not to the individual. I can make an example of a property or the real estate that holds a license for running a restaurant, for example. That license, that permit, doesn't disappear just because there's a new owner to that restaurant. It follows the asset. A personal license, to give you another example, would be a taxi license. That is tied to the person. Is this person qualified, etc., right? So this is what's been concluded. The rental license is real. It's tied to the property, meaning that a new buyer of the property will also become the owner, so to speak, the holder of the license.
Okay. So if the license already is valid and is already in the Registro Único, that's from July 1st, it has to be. Does it make sense that it would have to get express community? Isn't that just cheating?
This is the interesting part, right? At least I think for this market, and especially for lawyers, when we like to dig into these kind of things, and it is complicated. You have to say that first. You're not going to get any easy, very clear answers from me, and that is because the regulations are not that easy, right? So don't shoot the messenger, please. But okay, let's start with the current situation before this new decision. What do we know? 3rd of April, right, this year, new regulations saying that you need to have a 3/5 community, that community of owners can prohibit rental activity within the community with a 3/5 majority vote. But if you, as a property owner, you have a license prior to 3rd of April, a decision made in June or July against the short-term rental activity cannot retroactively punish that owner.
So if you've already got it, you got it. You're safe.
If you have it, you have it, according to the new law that came in 3rd of April, right? And that makes sense because it's a very well-established legal principle that a government or a state or a legal, cannot punish individuals retroactively. If you have a beneficial decision handed to you, that cannot be removed that easily. A bad decision can't be removed retroactively, right? And in favor of a positive one. So that's important to understand. That's where we were, right? Until this new ruling or decision came from the Ministry of Justice. The question now, if I am a potential buyer of a property right now, there is a license before the 3rd of April. So the current owner is protected by the principle of retroactivity. There is a vote in July or last week against this activity. And I become the new owner. And now, because we know that the property apparently is tied to, the rental license is tied to the property and not to me, the new owner, why would a registry, a registration of me as a new owner activate or trigger a review of that consent? Because it has nothing to do with me as an individual, as the owner. The license is tied to the property, and if it fulfills the requirements, meaning that it fulfills the urban regulations, other requirements of air conditioning, number of bedrooms, fire extinguisher, etc., right? Then, from a legal principle point of view, I would argue, and I think many other lawyers would as well, towards the registry, they would say that if you're going to ask me to hand in, to attach the community consent, this decision, I'm going to question that, why? Why do you require that from me? Because it's nothing to do, now that I'm registering as a new owner, has nothing to do with the validity of the license. It's already there. It's tied to the property. So that's where the legal battle,
will come from.
will come from.
So, but in the meantime, just for agents and people listening to this to understand, whilst it's a positive signal because it makes the argument you just described stronger, what's the difference? So it's changing from me to you. It's the property's not changed, right? But just be careful. Don't be telling potential buyers it's not a problem. You're able to transfer. You don't need to get the consent because this is new rule. Just slow down. I think would it be right to say that, knowing how these things are over the next few months, this should probably be enough actual cases going on to maybe make the Andalusia tourism registry reconsider the request for that for a name of change? Would that be a fair thing?
Well, I think anyone from a property owner or individual or potential investor or a professional working in the real estate market, not only in Andalusia but anywhere in Spain, really, what are we hoping for, right? We're hoping for predictability. We're hoping for clarity. We're hoping to know that we want to advise our clients in the best possible way and the clearest possible way, right? And we can only do that if the regulations and the instructions are clear. I hope and I would urge the local tourism registry to, I'm sure they will have a couple of meetings about this to conclude, what does this actually imply for us as a registry? We need to follow this decision, but what does it mean in practical terms? Are we changing our instructions or not voluntarily? And if they're not doing that voluntarily, I can see legal battles going to court, etc. about this, I'm sure. So to your question, and to agents, we already say this, we said this for some time now. The legal framework in regards to short-term rentals has been very complex for a while now. Not only the regulations themselves, how they are written, but maybe more importantly, the actual practical, application of those regulations. I mentioned to you before the video started here that I've heard not only from our lawyers, but from other lawyers on the market, that the actual application of these regulations and instructions differ from time to time or from municipality to municipality. That is not helpful, from anyone's point of view. So either they change it themselves, or somebody's going to force a legal battle. But to a client, to an agent, we always recommend, if you have a client and they tell you, find me a property that I can rent out short term, it's 100% deal breaker. I will not buy it if I'm not 100% sure that I could continue with this activity or perform that activity. try to gather as much information as possible as an agent. First of all, I recommend any seller and their legal representatives to gather that information before it's put on the market. Why not? A transparent product is always easier to sell. And with that information, try to advise your client as good as possible about the potential rental activity on this property. But as an end solution or recommendation, if an offer is made, a reservation contract is drafted, I would always recommend to put as a special condition, subject to the confirmation of short or tourism rental activity. Give your lawyer a week or two to only dig into that little matter, right? Important matter, and try to conclude as soon as possible if it's possible or not to rent it out. We have to check the bylaws. Are there any decisions being made? Are there any new instructions from the registry, etc., right? And better to check only that, to focus on that matter and move on to the next one if you think that's not possible.
That's good advice. Should sellers have a lawyer to do this in advance, so that from an agent point of view, taking a listing, logic to me, I don't know, I'm just being simplistic, but logic to me would be that it would make any transaction smoother and less messing around. As a seller, I don't really want someone to put a deposit that's returnable if they can't have the rental license, because then my property's off market for that period of time. Would it not make more sense for anybody selling a property in the current situation, whilst it's still unclear, that a property that is highly likely to want to be of value, have a short-term license, it has a short-term license, to have that ready. It has a short-term license, some information as to whether the community has voted or not, and if they have, what that resolution is, to be able to hand it over to the other agent from the buyer's side to sort of make the transaction simpler. Is that something that should be hiring a lawyer a bit earlier?
Well, I think that should be done in any case. Okay. If you're a seller and you're contemplating to sell your property, and this is what we do with our clients when we're representing sellers, of course, if they approve it, but normally they do, is that we always do a due diligence of the property before it's put on the market, because any potential buyer wants to know what they're buying. So this kind of a secrecy I've been experiencing for many years here, versus an agent and now as a lawyers, I think we have to leave that behind us. And I think that the modus operandi going forward should always be that a proper due diligence of the legal situation of the property should always be concluded by a lawyer. And we do that. We draft that in a memo. We give a copy to the client, of course. We give a copy to the seller's agent that he or she can distribute to any agents potentially interested or have clients for that property, with a simple, from the simple point of view that a transparent product is easier to sell. Because when do we experience that deals don't go through? Well, there can be different reasons to that, of course, but my experience is that most of the time it is because there's some information that's not being handed over, or it's not being clear for the buyer. They enter into a due diligence process. Suddenly they find out that there is now a missing license here, or a debt there, or whatever it might be. And from my point of view, that could unease potential buyers. They are prepared from their own home countries, from their experiences, that information should always be clear and available. Isn't that so here in Spain? And this kind of maybe they get a little bit worried about that. So why do that? Let's avoid that. And how can we avoid it? We can avoid it by always doing a legal proper due diligence of the property before it's put on the market. That's what I think.
Especially at the moment, whilst everything's so unclear. Like if there's...
Especially in the, especially, but I mean, especially now, but I think always.
Isn't it also a duty though, just as a side shoot? Isn't the change for the horizontal property law from last year, wasn't that one of the things that we kind of got brushed over, or the Ley de Vivienda and all that, they're supposed to be transparent with all that information anyway? Wasn't that one of the things?
Yeah, no, it's true, and it's included in the law that any intermediary, that includes agents and lawyers and others, have a duty to inform potential buyers of a full and clear information about the property. This is nothing new, really. I mean, you have a civil code, you have laws in Spain that if you know that you have to provide information to any potential buyer, etc. But you can find it even there in that regulation.
Okay, so then final takeaway on this piece of news. I think we did the audience a bit of a favor by explaining it right at the beginning of the video what it actually meant, is that it's a good sign, but it just take it slow to agents. It doesn't mean what you hope it means just yet, but it's a good sign. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say. I think it's important before we quit here to say that we can't tell potential buyers today. There's no problem. The rental license is tied to the property. It will be transferred to you. Whatever they have said in the community of owners, it doesn't apply to you. You can just keep renting it out. We hopefully, right? Maybe from certain point of views, but that's not clear. That's not very much not clear yet. I hope to see some new instructions, some new communications from Junta, or there will be a legal battle. Legal battles takes time, and we will see then in time what will be revealed.
So watch this space and we'll keep you posted. Is that the message?
Well, always.
Okay, you got it straight from the horse's mouth. Thank you very much.